Africa is a continent rich in gold, ivory, diamonds, and fertile lands. A land with kingdoms and empires, cultures and traditions stretching thousands of years. Yet in 1884, in the heart of Europe, men in dark suits sat around a polished table in Berlin and divided it as if it were a cake. This was the Berlin Conference, the meeting that stole a continent. The late 19th century was an age of empires. Britain had built its dominance in India, France was expanding across Asia, and Belgium's King Leopold II had already laid brutal claim to the Congo. But in Africa, chaos was brewing. European powers were racing against one another, planting flags and signing treaties, desperate not to be left behind in what would be called the Scramble for Africa. And so, Chancellor Otto von Bismarck of Germany called the powers of Europe together. 14 nations answered: Britain, France, Belgium, Portugal, Italy, Spain, Germany, and more. Noticeably absent was every single African voice. Not one African leader was invited. Decisions about Africa would be made without Africa. Over the course of 3 months, from November 1884 to February 1885, the rules of conquest were written. The key principle was effective occupation. A country could not simply claim a territory on paper. It had to demonstrate control through military presence, administration, or economic activity. The Congo Basin and Niger River were declared free trade zones open to all. The transatlantic slave trade was condemned. But make no mistake, this was not about morality. It was about replacing the slave trade with something much more profitable: Africa's resources. And in perhaps the most fateful decision, King Leopold II's personal claim to the Congo Free State was recognized. It would soon become one of the most horrific sites of exploitation in human history. The ink was barely dry before the race intensified. France took vast territories in West Africa, Britain claimed Egypt, South Africa, and the lands in between, dreaming of a railway from Cape to Cairo. Portugal clung to Mozambique and Angola. Germany seized what would become Namibia, Tanzania, and Cameroon. By 1914, only 2 African nations remained independent: Liberia, supported by the United States, and Ethiopia, which stood proudly after defeating an Italian invasion at Adwa in 1896. But what did these new borders mean for Africans? Entire ethnic groups were cut in half. Enemies were forced to live under the same colonial administration. Ancient trade routes were disrupted. Kingdoms were dismantled, and in the Congo Free State, millions were worked to death under Leopold's brutal robber regime. The Berlin Conference was not just a political gathering. It was the blueprint for colonization, exploitation, and suffering that would shape Africa's destiny for more than a century. The artificial borders drawn in Berlin still shape Africa today. Many of the conflicts of the 20th century and even the 21st trace their roots back to that fateful meeting in Berlin. Africa endured. From the fires of colonialism came powerful independence movements. Leaders rose, nations were born, and the continent began reclaiming its story. The Berlin Conference of 1884 was the day Africa was divided without consent, but it was never conquered in spirit. For while Europe drew lines on a map, the people of Africa held on to something far stronger: identity, resilience, and the unbreakable will to rise again.